Hello and welcome back to the channel. We're up to episode 8. In this episode we're going to build Tamiya's brand new M36 Jackson tank destroyer. This is a brand new kit from Tamiya. I had to order this one from Hobby Easy in Hong Kong as it's not out here in Australia as yet. So stick around. So look, absolutely fantastic brand new kit, number 380 I think it is. 390 in Tamiya's range, which is wild. I'm not going to go into the box. Yes, it's a sturdy cardboard box, substantially bigger than the H39 kit which I built last time, oddly enough. This is an all-new kit from Tamiya. So let's have a quick look at some of the detail on the sprues. As I mentioned, this is a whole new kit. Tamiya's done a really good job of the detail on the hull. You can see the little tags for fuel and water fillers. Obviously the filler caps are separate, but actually you can read the text in that, which is pretty cool. Lots of really nice detail. The lower hull is built up from flat pack, like an IKEA kitchen, in keeping with how Tamiya do things, which works really quite nicely. There's your sprue for the turret components. A few knockout pins on the inside of the turret there, but that's easy enough to fix. Beautiful multi-part figure, which we'll get to later on. And then a couple of sprues for running gear. These are all new Lincoln length tracks. I think the M10 came with rubber band tracks, as I recall. There'll probably be a lot of comparison in this video to Tamiya's M10, but they're very similar vehicles. And a new way to assemble the bogies and running gear, which is kind of cool. So while we're at it, we'll do a quick comparison to Tamiya's M10. So this is the underside of the M36. You can see the hatch arrangement there. So if we look at the underside of Tamiya's M10 kit, it's one I built earlier, you can see the hatch arrangement is quite different. So the M10, I believe, is a diesel version, whereas the M36 runs a petrol engine. I'm not sure if it's the Ford V8 or not, but I'm sure people can tell me in the comments. Also, if we look at the engine deck, you can see on the M10 it's a very narrow louver arrangement, whereas on the M36 it's a double wide louver arrangement, and there's a lot more fuel fillers on the M10 as well. So all new sprues, which is really great. So we start off by looking at the suspension and the wheels that come in the kit. The M36 comes with spoked wheels, which is very common for M36s, but equally as common are the pressed wheels, which are on the M10, so you can mix and match absolutely. To me, we've devised a new way of assembling the VVSS bogies. I start by removing the mould seam off the road wheel tyres, pretty quick process just with a emery board. Then gluing these together is a pretty simple process. I always think these look like little motorbikes for some reason. That's absurd. But anyway, I like to be a bit careful with the glue. You can see how they slide on to the bogie, and there's no outside detail on the bogie body itself. And these are now a separate piece from Tamiya, which actually is a pretty clever way of doing it. Gives lots of detail on the front face, lots of cast numbers and that sort of stuff as well, which is good. You can see there some cast numbers. There's a little insert. The insert helps to hand the front face, I guess, if you like, so left or right-handed, depending on which side the vehicle's going to go on. You can see it just glues on. If I can just keep it on screen. Look, there's a few mould seams there where the parts have joined together, but that's okay, we'll address those in the next step. Add the rear section of the bogie on. And it goes together really well. I like to, you have to address those mould seams, those gaps a little bit, where the parts have joined together. I like to nip off the return roller skids, or the track skids. I'll be replacing those with T-Rex 3D printed parts, and it's a good opportunity to clean this up and putty up the gaps. So I'll just use Tamiya grey putty. Usually I do this the last thing at night, so the putty dries overnight and I can address it the next morning. And these are the 3D printed track skids from T-Rex, which are a really great addition. So, yep, Tamiya putty's dry. Check the wheels still move. Don't make motorbike noises. And then just a quick file just to remove the bulk of the putty. I do this pretty pretty quickly. You don't need to see me. You don't need to watch me doing this. But yeah, look, it's a pretty quick process just to clean up. The beauty of it is, as much effort you put in here, it's all going to get covered by mud anyway. But yeah, a quick file, and I just use quite a rough file to get as much putty off as quickly as possible. You can always clean it up later with a bit of glue. And I use an old Scotch-Brite scouring pad as well, just to help clear away any debris, any dust and that sort of stuff. Sticking with the bogies, there's always an opportunity to add just a little bit more detail. Using RP Tools punch and die set, I just punch out some 1mm discs, 1.2mm discs from... no, I actually ended up using 1mm, they were too big, 1.2. Anyway, punch out a couple of discs for the top of the bogies. These are I guess the bolt recesses for the internal volute springs. You can see in this image there the two round discs, I'll drill out later on. So just a matter of bit of glue on top of the bogie, and then just applying the punched out styrene disc. Yeah, I ended up going with 1mm disc, not 1.2mm, so they were just a bit big otherwise. You will see these under the track skids, but of course if I end up adding mud to the suspension you probably won't see them, but look, it's good to know they're there. Continuing on as well with the bogies, you can add 4 holes in the forward face there just above that road wheel, and the bogies were actually cast as a universal bogie, and depending on where the return roller was added, was either front or rear, left or right, was whether the actual bogie was a left or right unit bogie. So there was always 4 holes visible at the front of the bogie. So just quickly drill those out with a small drill bit. One last step for the bogies is to add on the T-Rex 3D printed track skids. These are infinitely more detailed and much more fine than the kit parts themselves, and they really do enhance the look of the bogies quite well. You can see there they're very detailed and very fine. Look, if you were going to, these aren't a mandatory add for your kits, but I always find they really make a really nice difference to the model, unless you're going to have it covered in mud. As with a lot of these Tamiya kits that are flat pack like this, they do have some knockout pins on the side, which is a bit uncool. Easy enough to fix with a quick sand. Then it's on to gluing in the lower hull floor, really just for the fighting compartment floor. You don't get a driver's compartment, unfortunately. The hull parts do go together very, very well. You can't get them anything other than perfectly square, as you'd expect from Tamiya. Bit of glue and away we go. Then the final drive housing. The kit represents a late model M36, so the final drive housing is the more pointed version. Really only Sherman nerds are going to probably understand that, but it does represent a nice late version, and I just use a bit of extra putty to blend in the external crew step there, just to make sure that there's no gaps. Then the rear, the rear firewall, the rear hull wall can be glued in with the exhaust pipes and the big air ducting there, that sort of stuff, radiator housing, air ducting, anyway, gubbins, stuff at the back. This glues on really well. Most of it's going to be hidden anyway once you glue the upper hull on, the way it overhangs, but it all does fit perfectly as you'd expect from Tamiya. I normally like to do all my painting at the end of construction, but in this case I will just paint the interior very quickly. I'm going to use Tamiya LP lacquers on this model. So quick blast of olive drab on the interior components that are going to be seen through the hull top. This stuff sprays on beautifully, as you'd expect, because it's Tamiya. Just make sure everything's covered up. You can't see much down in the interior, which is quite good, because unfortunately there is a big gap in that there's no driver's compartment. And then I just mix a bit of sand yellow with the original olive drab colour just to get some highlights. It's not super important because this is the interior and you're not going to see much, but I do just like to cover it up anyway. A quick bit of overspray, so lightening it up a bit. Hard to tell because it's dark green on dark green, but you get the general idea. Then it's out with the LP1 black to paint the ammo racks, or the ammo storage on the sponsons. Those get given a quick blast of black, and they'll get glued in later once we've done a bit of extra detail painting of the strapping and that sort of stuff. Really, again, I sound like a bit of a broken record, but you will not see much of this once the hull top is down and the turret's in. Once the interior is painted, you can start weathering. In this case, I'm just going to give the model a quick wash with some German camouflage beige from Vallejo, mixed very heavily with tap water, and this really does provide a nice dusty appearance on the inside of the vehicle. And you can see I'm just brushing it on quite haphazardly. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's just going to give a dusty appearance and a bit of a dirty appearance to around detail and that sort of stuff. Here is actually the sponsons where the ammo storage goes, but on the whole floor I brush it on quite liberally. It settles around detail and settles in and amongst the tread plate flooring, and really does look quite good. Unfortunately, you can't see much down through the turret, and I sound like a bit of a broken record, but it's just enough here to sort of give you an indication that there is some detail there. Once that's dry, I give the whole thing a quick dry brush with some chrome silver from Tamiya, using little enamel bottles. It looks really rough here and a bit heavy-handed. I do appreciate that. It's done on purpose because it's very dark in there, so I just want it to sort of stand out when you do look down through the turret top. So, yeah, it's probably a bit more heavy-handed than I normally would be, but there's a reason. Once that's done, you can glue in the sponson ammo storage. Now, the ammo in the sponsons was actually stored inside cardboard containers, hence why they're black, not brass coloured. And then once they're glued in, you can glue the sponsons in themselves. And these glue to the upper side, the underside of the upper hull, I should say. And they fit perfectly as you'd expect from Tamiya. And once they're glued in, you can then glue the upper and lower hulls together, trapping the interior components and sort of sealing them in there for good. And you can see here, you can't see much once the hull parts are together. And a bit of extra thin in and around the transmission cover there, just to seal it all in. One final step for weathering the interior is just to add some oil spills and oil stains. I use Tamiya panel line washers for these. Really super simple. Just splash them around like the crew has spilt oil or lubricant from the main gun when they were servicing it, that sort of thing. It's a very quick process and it adds a really pleasing effect. One really common modification to M10s, M36s was to cut the front side skirts off, if you like, that would on the underside of the hull side, if you like. So I just cut off the kit part on the panel line. It's a pretty simple process. So the knife blade straight off, and then there's 3 securing bolts that I also remove as well. And drill out the locating holes for those. So it's a matter of just lopping them off really quickly with a knife blade, and then breaking out the tiny drill bits and drilling 3 holes. Nice if it was in focus too. Need to work on that a bit. There we go, now it's in focus. Also thin out the back of this panel a little bit as well, just to add a bit of scale thickness, or remove a bit of scale thickness if you like, and then bend the corners a bit and mangle them up. In real life they get caught on the tracks and caught on stuff as they were driving along. There you go. Another really common thing was to cut the front corner off the front fenders. So I just, using Tamiya side cutters, just cut them straight off, and then get it nice and, trimmed down, and then we can sand this smooth as it's pretty rough. You can see where I've cut it off. Doesn't really matter at this stage, we're just getting rid of as much material as possible. Just cut it straight off. Break the last bit. Surprised you haven't seen me bite it off with my teeth, but I'm not that much of an animal. Anyway, and then just use a rough sanding stick just to smooth the edge. In real life, these were gas axed or oxyed off anyway, or cut with a reciprocating saw of some kind. So you don't have to be too careful with it, but I mean, you don't want it to look like a dog's breakfast entirely. So there you go, removed. It shows how thick the fender part is, so I just thin it out with my knife blade and a file, just to add a bit of scale thickness to it, or remove a bit of excess material, just so that it looks in scale. Very common thing with M10s and M36s. Another common thing for the unit I'm doing is to remove a little horseshoe-shaped wedge of the lower hull side, and this was so that the crews could access the idler wheel. So I just traced it out using the idler wheel, just a semicircular sort of shape, and then just cut it with a blade. Once that was done, I just used a file to, rough the edges up a little bit, and also to thin the inside of the part so that it does look like it's just thin sheet metal, because that's all it was in real life, was thin sheet metal. A quick bit of work with a file, and then glue the kit part on. You can see that's the underside of the hull. It's hard to describe. Underside of the hull side. Yeah, it's the part that angles back. And you can see the thin down parts here. I just like to give them a quick brush with Tamiya glue just to blend any of the work in, make sure it's all looking nice and neat. Then you can pop the sprocket back on, and that's the look we're going for. Quite a simple mod, but very effective. In preparation for some future detail work, I glued in the kit headlight guards, which are really heavy. Made sure they're really solidly glued in, then cut them off, leaving the ends in the hole, which saves having to fill them with putty, and then you just trim it and sand it later once the glue is really dry. I also nipped off the horn mount, which was a big solid lump of plastic, which would actually be a very thin sheet metal mount. Cut that off with a pair of side cutters, and then trimmed it off camera. There you go. Trimmed it with a knife blade, just smoothed it out. Leaves a bit of a hole in the hull front, unfortunately, but that's easy enough to fill. I just got some styrene rod and super glued it into the hole, and again nip that off with a pair of side cutters, and then sand it smooth once it's dry, and then you won't know it's there. One thing I wanted to add was empty grousers. Empty grouser mounts on the side of the hull. The kit gives you track grousers that are in the mounts, but I wanted to have the mounts empty. So you can see they fit on the side of the hull like that. And these were fitted to the tracks to stop them skidding in the snow and mud. So I just went to Fusion and designed a very simple empty track grouser mount, a long and a short mount, to print in 3D. This didn't take too long. A bit of a journey trying to learn how to do this sort of stuff, but I've been getting a lot of help from people. Thanks Chris, thanks John. So after printing them off, it's a pretty quick one. They had a 15-minute print, which is pretty good. These were glued to the hull side, and you can see, they replaced the kit parts, and they're empty, which means you can add stowage to them and that sort of stuff if you like. Just make sure they're glued nice and straight. Making parts like this in Fusion is really satisfying, and actually using them on your own model is very, very satisfying. There you go. Next, the kit fuel caps and radiator caps were glued on. These are all separate parts. Really nice detail from Tamiya, and you can see, it says gasoline and water where the water radiators are, water fillers are. That's really nice detail from Tamiya. Wouldn't expect anything less from them. And there you go, there's just a horn mount made from some styrene offcuts, and I've glued the headlights in and sanded the brackets, or the holes where the brackets were. I've added some spare track to the spare track mounts, and added the tail lights in as well. And we'll address adding some further detail to the hull later on in the next video. Moving on to the turret. Now, first thing I wanted to address was some knockout pins on the inside of the turret face. You can see these, so I just sanded them with various grades of sanding sponge, and then a fibre pen just to make sure all the dust and stuff has been removed, and also give it just a very quick brush on with some liquid glue once I've glued the turret ring on. Just brush the insides a little bit with liquid glue just to make sure everything's all blended in. The turret is basically made up of a few quite large parts that, as you'd expect, fit amazingly well. It's classic to me, really. And I was going to paint these before gluing them together, but you can actually get inside the turret really easily with an airbrush, so it's just as easy to assemble as much as you can beforehand. And the rear counterweight is a beautiful one piece that just slots straight on. It's actually ammo stowage, not a counterweight. The breech is made up of several components. I skipped ahead and built these earlier, and then sanded all the join lines smooth, flexifile and various other sanding sponges. There's plenty of opportunity to add more detail to this. I haven't started researching, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole just yet as to what needs to be added, but it is quite detailed from Tamiya. You can see where I've moved all the knockouts from the inside of the turret walls there. The assembly for the gun traps a couple of polycaps, as you'd expect, and it slides straight into the turret shell. I'm going to leave all this separate so that I can paint it and then glue it all together in the next video. The turret roof section just glues straight on. will fit straight on. Again, I'm not gluing just yet. Some lovely screw bolt detail on the top there. Moving into the turret interior, there's a lot of detail to add, a lot of seating, a lot of turret traverse and elevation gear. There is going to be a lot missing from this, lots of hydraulic lines and lots of electrical cabling and that sort of stuff. Obviously the moulding limitations of Tamiya aren't going to add that, and they're not known for adding mega detail for their interiors. But looking down through the turret top, it is very busy, and we'll paint up really nicely. So commander's seat, gunner's seat, gunner's traverse mechanism there, and a partial floor. And then we add more traverse mechanisms and the loader's seat on that side of the turret. And just test fitting the turret race and turret floor, you can see it's quite busy, which is really pleasing, and it'll paint up really nicely. Lots of room for the aftermarket guys to add detail here. Gun sight glued to the turret sidewall, and spare gun cleaning rods and flag holders and other detail. Fire extinguisher there and a couple of water bottles. Lots of little electrical boxes and that sort of stuff. Binoculars case, cable reel, just some smaller details. And in the turret rear, what I called out as a turret counterweight is actually a turret bustle, and that's where ready racks for ammunition is stored. And these are made up of a couple of parts that are then glued together, which is quite ingenious from Tamiya. It's quite a detailed kit part, multi-part thing. And then it just pushes straight into the opening. It's a friction fit, don't need to glue it. Really nicely done. And that just pops straight onto the turret rear like that. Again, I was going to leave this separate, but I can get at it with an airbrush, so I'm going to glue it in now. It's a beautiful weld detail that Tamiya have included around that rear part of the turret. It's just beautiful. That fits on perfectly, no need for any putty or anything like that. It does have a slight mould seam, as does the main gun barrel. So this is the kit part, and break out the old flexi file. Just give it a quick sand. It's a very pleasing thing, very pleasing tool to use, a flexi file. And then I just use an old Scotch Brite pad that's well worn, just to buff out any scratches and scrapes from cleaning off the mould parting line. Once that's done, you can test fit the mantlet. And we're getting near the end of construction now. So this is a late model gun with a thread protector at the end of the barrel. That's really nice. Slight cast texture on the cast mantlet as well, which is well done from Tamiya. I always like to enhance that. And this time I'm going to use some Mr. Surface of 500 grey, and then just slop it on. Don't have to be super careful with this. I'll give it a sand after it's dry, because it's not a Russian casting, it's an American casting, so it's quite high quality. But I just add a bit of extra texture to the cast parts, which I think everyone does now, don't they? And also added a small amount of cast texture, enhanced really what texture was there on the rear turret bustle. I scraped away some mould seams, so there was a few little sort of marks that could be reinstated. And that brings us nearly to the end of this video. I've just taped some of the parts together just so we can get a look at how the model looks. And it does look pretty good. So in the next video I'm going to be adding a ton of detail. I didn't want to cover it off in this video. So thank you for sticking around this far. And in the next video you'll see me use all of these aftermarket goodies, which I've been accumulating over the last little bit, waiting for this kit to come out. So we'll see you in the next video. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for sticking around.